All right, thank you so much for being here with us.
Of course.
And so let me introduce you a little bit so everyone else knows. And Amanda's from the class of 2019, so we have a few people from that class here, so welcome. So thank you for being with us. Amanda is the co-founder of Kitsap's first, is it Kitsap's first charter school?
That's right.
Right? Catalyst Public Schools, which opened just this fall in Manette during a pandemic, which I can't even imagine. So I can't wait for you to share a little bit more about that. And Catalyst is a tuition-free nonprofit charter public school, and it's open to all students, regardless of ability, need, or zip code. And like I mentioned before, Amanda is also a graduate of the Leadership Kitsap class of 2019, who they'll all tell you it's the best class ever. And Amanda has a vast background in education and designing educational programs in schools that are innovative, equity-driven, and high-achieving. And prior to launching Catalyst, she was the VP of Schools at Innovate Public Schools in California, the founding principal of UP Academy Charter School of Boston, and the founding principal of Boston Preparatory Charter School in Hyde Park, Massachusetts. A lot. And also, I know that you had to face many hurdles opening a charter school here, which involved a lot of community building, advocacy, authentic leadership, and reason. So, and I'm sure it was made even more difficult by the pandemic. So we're really excited to have you here today to share a little bit about your story and highlight the capacity that we're studying today, reason. So welcome.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind, do you mind sharing us a little bit about yourself and maybe how you came to work in education?
Sure. Yeah. And I apologize for any background noise. Like many of you, I'm sure I'm at home homeschooling two kids, have a puppy, and a husband working from home. So it is what it is these days.
Yeah,
I'd be happy to share. I grew up in the South. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and ended up going to college in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I think being raised in the South impacted me really deeply from a pretty young age. I became very passionate about issues around social justice and equity. And when I was in college in New Orleans, I started volunteering in some of the public schools there. And this was pre-Katrina. And I just saw huge gaps in the quality of not only education, but just the quality of facilities, the quality of teachers. Really, the quality of everything was very divided along lines of race and class. And that just kind of set a spark in me, I think, as a young person wanting to dedicate my life to be part of the solution around those equity gaps. And so after college, I joined a program called Teach for America, which is sort of like the Peace Corps for teaching. They take recent college graduates and provide a little bit of training and then have you teach in the highest need schools across the country. And so I ended up teaching in rural Louisiana for several years and decided that I wanted to stay in education. So that's what I did.
So that you kind of spoke to this a little bit, but what would you say is your purpose? Like, what gets you up in the morning?
I think for me, it's definitely, I think that I think we would live in a very different world if we cared about other people's children the way we do our own. And I think that that's what drives me, is that I think that I believe very deeply that the gaps we see in educational outcomes for kids has nothing to do with who the children are or the families that they come from or the zip codes that they live in. I think it has to do with our inability as a society to level the playing field so that kids get equal access to a great education. And that's what drives me, is that I know it's possible when schools and community come together for kids, and that's what I get up to do every day.
Well, and it sounds like that was maybe one of the reasons you were driven then to start Catalyst.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you use the capacity of reason to assess the community's needs, to to position then Catalyst as that solution?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, when I think about the concept of reason through a leadership lens, I think that too often people who are in leadership positions think that because they have an idea, it's the right idea. And I think that for too long, in education, but in many fields, we'll have leaders come up with an idea and then kind of, say, this is my great idea and I'm just going to go forward and do it. And, if I build it, they will come kind of a mentality. And I think that, well, I hope that what we're learning over time is that to be a leader who leads with reason, you really have to listen to the community you're working alongside of and have more of a mentality of we're going to come up with the idea for the solution together instead of doing it for people. People don't need to be saved. They don't need to be even really led necessarily. But you need to have that open space and that open communication. And so when we first started thinking about starting Catalyst, our first step was to do basically a listening tour across Kitsap County. My co-founder, Tatiana, and I both live here in Kitsap County. But when we started thinking about this about 3 years ago, we were both working remotely, doing basically coaching school principals. She was working in DC. I was working in the Bay Area. And we had like really, really great stable jobs that we were happy with. But we started really just doing this listening tour across the county, sharing the experience that we've had starting schools and just asking, is there a need for this in Kitsap County? And if so, where? And we let those were conversations mostly with parents, with community leaders, with faith leaders. And what we heard was that there was a need and that there were a lot of families in Bremerton and the surrounding areas in Kitsap that were nervous about, what the future would hold for their kids. And through those conversations, pretty much everybody pointed us to Bremerton and said, if you're going to start a school, that's where you need to go. And so that's what we did.
Wow. So starting the school in Bremerton, and it sounds like you did a lot of listening. So how did you get those people that involved? Like, how did you get the community involved in becoming then advocates for your model of learning?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. So we started really just doing hundreds of one-to-one conversations with folks across the county. Just again, listening, getting to know their stories, getting to know, if we were to start this school, what would they want to see in it? And from there, we started a community design team. And so we met monthly. And that was a design team open to all. We invited, folks from the local school districts, parents, community leaders, and
Oh no, she froze.
She did. I thought it was my computer.
I'm like, no, is it me? We'll see if we can't get her back.
Sorry,
There you are. You're back.
I was like, oh, Katie didn't like what I was saying. She just cut.
No, like you froze. No, I love what you're saying. I find this so fascinating because I think your situation plays to so many of our capacities because you positive leadership, but when you're talking about community building and advocacy and just like facing the realities of creating something new into a community, I think it's fascinating. And maybe to touch on what you were saying before, like what to go into, like what about, hold on, let me find it. Can you tell us a little bit about like with the pandemic, starting a school during the pandemic, what kind of realities did you have to face there and what.
Yeah.
I just feel like, oh my gosh, you're starting a new school. You already have that. And then you have all of the stuff coming down from the state where you can't be in person or, and you're trying to build community. So how'd you do that?
Yeah, we got really creative. So as a charter school, we're a public school, but of course, no kids are assigned to us. So we have to go out and recruit our families and get people to sign up. And it's really important to us that every level of our organization, from our students to our staff to our board, really represent the diversity of Bremerton itself. And so, you know, sometimes if schools just kind of sit back and whoever signs up, gets a seat at the school, it can represent a more white and affluent population. We didn't want that to happen. So when COVID hit, we decided to, really focus our recruitment efforts via social media. And we did a few things. We got really creative. We hosted some free virtual online camps for kids. So this was like, March, April, May last year, when most schools were still really struggling to figure out how to do online learning well. And so we did for little kids, we did a bee camp all about bees. And for older kids, we did a design challenge camp. And we served about 100 kids over the course of a couple of months through those online camps. They were really, really successful. We sent every child a kit in the mail of all the materials they would need for the kit, and did some things like that. We also did online, we did open read alouds of novels for older children and storybooks for younger children. And, we kept doing information sessions and things like that. To get parents involved, we also did things like, we did a lot of giveaways. We knew that people were out of work, fearful about medical costs and things like that. So we did a lot of giving away of Amazon gift cards to families in need. We even, towards the latter spring, we rented a snow cone truck and went around to the parks in Bremerton and the low-income housing developments where a lot of our families live, and gave out free snow cones in a socially distant way. So, we really tried to do everything that we could, but it's nerve-wracking. When COVID hit, we were just about to enter into a $4 million renovation project on our building. We were trying to start the school with 168 kids. I would say we probably had about 100 signed up at that point. And so it was really one of those moments that, as school leaders, where Tatiana and I had to say, do we have faith that we can pull this off, or do we hold, do we just delay a year? And we decided that we wanted to do it. We thought that we could be a proof point here in Kitsap County for doing, if it was going to be remote learning, doing that exceptionally well. And to be a proof point that, we can do it. We can get a diverse school up and running with a great staff and great board. So that's what we're trying to do.
Well, and it sounds like it took a lot of courage, but I follow you also on social media, and I was always just so impressed just with your innovation and perseverance and resilience. So I think you really do encapsulate all of our capacities. So thank you. Do you have any advice then for the leaders on this call about using reason in decision making?
Yeah, I think, I think whenever you're in a leadership position, you are the emotional pace setter of the teams you are leading. And I think reason plays a really big role in that. I think, for example, at Catalyst right now, we've just made the decision, our kindergarten scholars started learning in person with us on Monday, and our first, fifth, and sixth grade scholars are coming back to school on Thursday. And, that's a big decision, right? Like, we're facing these really big decisions. Is it responsible to do that health-wise? And I think where reason comes into it is, you have to really, whenever you're making one of those big decisions, I think you have to turn back to your values as an organization and your values as a person. And you have to think through every possible outcome. And at the end of the day, if you're willing to kind of roll the dice and take any of those possibilities, then you you can sleep at night and think you're probably making the right decision. So that's what I would say when you're facing a tough decision. Just try to think of the worst possible outcomes and scenarios and how you're going to mitigate them, and then decide from there.
Yeah, I think it's great advice, and it plays a lot of what Alex was just talking about in our previous conversation about reason. Is there, before we take any questions, is there anything else you'd like to add about Catalyst?
No, I would just say, we're always looking for students, staff, and board members. So if folks, we are growing to be a full K-8 school. Next year, we will have seats in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, fifth, sixth, and seventh grades. I know it's a little bit funny, but charter schools tend to start small and then grow as the kids age. So that's what we're doing. We have an exceptional staff. We'll be hiring soon for new positions, both for lead teachers and also for what we call small group instructors, which are more like paraprofessionals. We take work around social justice and equity very seriously. Nearly 50% of our staff identify as people of color, compared to about 10 to 11% in local school districts. And our board is equally diverse. About 50% of our board members identify as people of color and are from Kitsap County. So we would always welcome folks to come out to the school in a safe, socially distanced manner and get to know us.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Amanda?
Carlita, can I ask a question? I'll unmute myself. Within my group, my department, or my group of coworkers, we are the majority of our workforce are now working at home, and majority of our employees are located within Kitsap County. And with the school districts going to school, not going to school, part-time going back to school and whatnot, we're seeing that our employees who are working full-time at home are also wearing a hat where they're having to be a teacher, and the third hat is they're still parenting because their children are at home. And so we're our employer, Bremerton Housing Authority, we're being flexible and understanding, this is just this is real world right now. Mm-hmm. And so while you may be processing a file or dealing with a client, we understand that you also may be learning the new math.
Right.
And so what tips or advice or suggestions would you have for those employees or, for that workforce that's having to balance several roles during the day?
Yeah, I think that, what this time calls for is sort of, thinking out of the box, getting more innovative. And I think, it sounds like you're doing, generally, I think that very much the right thing, being flexible, understanding, and also understanding beyond the day-to-day challenges of parenting and schooling that this time brings to us. Parents are also just dealing with a huge amount of stress psychologically, as we all are. But I think one of the things that I found in starting Catalyst is I feel like we're supporting our families just as much as we are the kids, because that's what everybody needs. I think, if your organization has the capacity or the bandwidth, what I've seen some organizations do, if they have facility space, is offering a space for parents to bring their kids in, where they can, have somebody kind of oversee the distance learning, not a teacher necessarily, but just somebody to kind of help with tech issues and keep kids on track, so that parents can be a little bit more free to work. There've been a few organizations that have done that I think have been really helpful, and it's gone far, I think, to just demonstrate a morale booster for their team, and things like that. I think the more you can try to connect your staff with resources to just help in the situation, the better, and I think also there is a logistical piece of I think in work right now, we all have a lot of pointless meetings on our calendars that really don't need to be there. So I think it's time to take a strong look at that and, really give people time as you can.
Thank
Mhm.
you, Amanda. We had a question in the chat from Debbie. Do you serve children with special needs in your program? And if so, how do you support those children?
Yeah, that's a great question. We absolutely do. Our model is mostly inclusion based. So in a lot of schools, children on IEPs or with special needs are served in separate classrooms, separate from their general education peers. And we don't think that that's best for the vast majority of scholars. So we serve kids in the general education classroom. We have an excellent special education staff who come in. We contract with our local ESD who provides services such as speech and OT and physical therapy. And then we have staff, our own staff who provide support. We also, several of our general education teachers are also certified in special education and have worked as special educators. And so those teachers have a lot of expertise. But yeah, we have a lot of scholars with diagnosed learning needs, and specifically a lot of scholars on the autism spectrum who have chosen Catalyst.
Thank you. And then Emma has her hand raised also. Emma.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for being here, Amanda. I'm just wondering if, as you were kind of setting up the school, if you had any pushback from different areas of the community, and if so, kind of how you responded to that or how you elicited buy-in from people who may not have believed that there was a need for Catalyst.
Yeah.
How did you kind of reach those people?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So having started schools in other parts of the country where kind of the charter politics are very, very nasty, it's been very collaborative. You know, I think that Bremerton and Kitsap County generally, I think we kind of pride ourselves on being, being reasonable and being polite. And I think because of the political diversity here, I felt like most people don't enter a room assuming that their point of view is necessarily 100% right all the time. Like, I think that's one of the reasons that we wanted to start the school in Bremerton is like to create a space, an educational space for kids where they can see across lines of difference and work together to generate solutions. That's a big part of our model. So, starting a charter school is a really lengthy process. Washington has one of the highest rated charter laws in the country. So to get the school started, we had to write an 800-page application to the Charter School Commission, and we had to demonstrate community investment. So we had a forum at the Marvin Williams Center in Bremerton where over 200 families came out to speak in support of us. We also, since the beginning, have tried to be very thoughtful about relationships with the local school districts. So we have, what I consider a very positive relationship with Central Kitsap, Bremerton, and South Kitsap with the superintendents. We meet regularly. Since COVID hit, I'm on calls with all the superintendents, multiple times a week, sharing plans, sharing best practice, trying to figure out what to do. I do know that on the ground level, there's been some grumblings. Those mostly come to me kind of by way of the grapevine. But I think, we just try to listen and, not everybody has to like that we're here, and that's okay. Like, that's okay. You don't have to like that we're here. And everybody has a right to their opinion. But, at the end of the day, when people question, why we're here, we just, we go back to our values and we say, look, we live in a county, we can see this locally where, families with means, they can move to Bainbridge, get their kids in those schools, they can put their kids in private schools. But low-income families don't have that option. And so we're an option for them. We're tuition free. And we're going to promise to do our best to get their kids a great education. So that's what we say.
Oh my
Thank
God.
you, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for being here with us today. I think you've just been a great example for positive leadership and for the capacity of reason. And we just so appreciate your time. And thank you for what you're giving to our community as well.
Of course. Yeah. Happy to do anything for Leadership Kitsap. Both Tatiana and I were part of the program and just appreciate you all so much. So.
Well, thank you so much. And we're going to turn it over now back to Jennifer, so everyone can take what they've learned from you and from Alex with their readings and create their own Thrive plan around reason.